Adolf Hitler had come to the conclusion that there had been once a fierce and a noteworthy opposition, military and diplomatic, in both Britain and France. He had fought the British and the French during the First World War and had been great admirers of the British and the French too, and recognised their tenacity at war. And he believed, with some justification, I'm afraid to say, that the generation of men who were capable of fighting and leading had all died on the battlefields of the Somme and Verdun. Hitler was reinforced in this idea through the events of the mid-1930s. Okay, so firstly, let's look at 1935 and the Anglo-German Naval Agreement. Hitler sent Joachim von Ribbentrop to London to negotiate the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, which was a revision of the naval clauses at the Treaty of Versailles, which allowed Germany to increase the tonnage of battleships that they were able to produce. The British were probably happy to acquiesce to this anyway. It was becoming apparent that it would be better to meet Hitler halfway than to wind up in a naval race that Britain couldn't afford. And also, the Royal Navy would probably still, after intense German naval building, still be able to outsize and outclass Germany. And the British were looking further afield to America and hoping that sort of mutual security arrangements would be possible there. So they weren't that bothered, but Ribbentrop, desperate to bring back a victory to his Führer, stormed into the offices of Sir John Simon, the Foreign Secretary, and shouted and berated at him and demanded and said, "We will go back. If you don't give us what we want, we will build as many ships as we like." What was he doing? Ribbentrop, a former champagne salesman who knew nothing about diplomacy, was trying to impress his Führer with his kind of belligerent stance and to be a significant player, and simply makes a fool out of himself and becomes the talk of London town in the most negative of senses. He's, for example, giving Hitler salutes to George VI and that kind of thing, the sorts of things you don't do. And then he gets his naval agreement, is appointed ambassador to London, and fails to get what Hitler really wants, which is a full treaty with the British, a military alliance, which would enable Hitler at some point to use Britain to wage war in the Soviet Union. This is what Hitler had basically hoped for, but it was a wish that was based on fairly kind of flimsy planning. The British were very, very unlikely to become involved with Hitler in that way, and Ribbentrop reported back to Hitler all sorts of kind of misleading things. Hitler, also in 1935, looked on as his ally Mussolini invaded Abyssinia, and the British and the French both undermined the League of Nations. Firstly with the Hoare-Laval Pact, and secondly with the decision to allow for oil through the blockade, the economic sanctions, the embargoes on Italy and occupied Abyssinia, and thus allowing Mussolini's war machine to operate almost without sanction. Hitler assumes, and he assumes correctly, that the British and the French will not do anything if he then tries to undermine A, the League of Nations, or B, the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler's decision to march troops back into the Rhineland is based on this assumption that the British and the French will not act because they haven't got really the stomach for it. So, Hitler marches his armies into the Rhineland to remilitarise the Rhineland with only 20,000 soldiers, facing almost 10 times as many French soldiers over the border, and he explicitly tells his generals, any sign of trouble, pull back, we can't actually afford the fight. When the French decide not to take on Hitler, it's because they know that their allies, the British, can't be relied on. The British have previously, the year before, signed a deal with Hitler, the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, and the French and the British are angry and divided over this. The French had very little idea what the British were up to. And the result is that what Hitler actually got out of the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, if he didn't actually get a full alliance later on, is he got to put immense pressure on the Franco-British relationship, and this gave him more leeway to undermine the Treaty of Versailles, knowing that the French and the British were unlikely to act jointly. Okay, I hope you found that useful, and by the way, if you do like this channel and you want to support it, subscribe down below and I'll be adding some more stuff shortly. Thanks, bye bye.